Hey, Gabbie.
Hey, Travis.
So you know how we're doing that whole episode about St. Augustine during Prohibition?
Yeah.
Well, I figured to make people feel like they're really there, I went ahead and built a scale model of the city of St. Augustine. Look, here's Henry Flagler.
I have a better idea.
This is way better.
Hey everyone, I'm Gabbie Heinzelman.
And I'm Travis Spangenberg. Welcome to Know Your Onions.
Welcome to St. Augustine, Florida, America's oldest city. For over 4 centuries, St. Augustine has never failed to excite. There have been deadly pirate raids that sent citizens fleeing into the swamps, failed sieges on the Castillo de San Marcos, including one by Savannah founder James Edward Oglethorpe, and the reimagining of the city as a luxury destination by Henry Flagler, the mastermind of the majestic Ponce de Leon Hotel. With all this excitement, it is no surprise that St. Augustine got its fair share of hijinks during Prohibition. While today, institutions like the St. Augustine Distillery do it the legal way, at times there was no legal way, and entrepreneurs had to pursue other avenues.
When you think of moonshiners, you might think of the mountains. But it turns out they're not the only secluded spot that's good for cooking up some liquor. St. Augustine's swamps and remote river banks made the perfect environment for avoiding the law. At the start of Prohibition, a single gallon of local moonshine could cost $60. In today's money, that's close to $800 for just 1 gallon. The swamps around St. Augustine were dominated by moonshiners looking to cash in on the opportunity. They would have gotten away with it too, if not for one man. Sheriff Elmer Boyce. Enforcement of Prohibition was a disaster across the country, and it largely depended on local officials filling in the gaps left by the woefully understaffed federal forces. If a city's police force was in the pocket of the local bootleggers, there was little hope in drying the place out. Elmer Boyce was a well-liked former mayor of St. Augustine when he took office as sheriff in 1919.
After successful raids, Sheriff Boyce would march his apprehended suspects through the gates of the city. It was important to him that the whole city see that he and his deputies were actively enforcing Prohibition. He'd also make sure that there were plenty of photos available of his successful bust.
Local criminals were brought here to the St. Johns County Jail. This building was used as a jail from 1891 until 1953. Its construction was financed by railroad magnate Henry Flagler so that he could build his Ponce de Leon Hotel where the previous jail had stood. While Flagler did not live to see Prohibition, he was a teetotaler, and it would make sense that he wanted the law in this city upheld, but not necessarily right next to where his hotel was going to stand. This jail was originally built for up to 72 prisoners and featured a women's section, a sheriff's quarters for officials like Elmer Boyce and his predecessor Joe Perry, and a death row cell. 8 prisoners were executed at the gallows behind the jail over the years. For those left behind, conditions could be worse than hanging. Instead of toilets, each cell had a single bucket, bathing was rare, and nutrition in meals was abysmal. This is not a place you would want to end up. Luckily, for the moonshiners and bootleggers, they allegedly had a man on the inside. Sheriff Elmer Boyce.
Turns out, there was a pretty good reason for Sheriff Boyce to make such a big deal out of all of those moonshine arrests. He was in on it. Apparently, Sheriff Boyce would call moonshiners in advance if he knew federal agents were going to be with him so they could evade arrest. When he did have to confiscate stills, he would take them apart and just put them in storage, just so the moonshiners could come get them later. So, the march through the city gates, the confiscation photos, all of it. It was all for show.
There are plenty of records of moonshine arrests in St. Augustine, but very few records of convictions. In 1920, two moonshiners got acquitted after Sheriff Boyce himself testified that their product was not so palatable.
Rum running became so profitable here in St. Augustine that many of the local fishermen just gave up fishing and did bootlegging instead. They would use this river here and many of the surrounding waterways to bootleg liquor from outside the country into this city. They would fill bags full of bottles and salt. That way, if a Fed boarded their ship, they could just throw it all overboard and it would sink to the bottom of the river. When the Fed left empty-handed, the salt would dissolve and it would all float back up where it could be retrieved. One local seen down here at the docks retrieving liquor was none other than Sheriff Elmer Boyce.
St. Augustine's liquor traffic was its best kept secret. Sheriff Boyce perfectly straddled the line between his image as the enforcer of the law and his commitment to the desires and thirsts of his community. His community took notice, and as thanks for that protection, they elected him sheriff for 25 years. Whatever you may think about his approach to prohibition enforcement, Sheriff Boyce deeply loved the city that he called home for over 60 years. And so have Travis and I. Thanks for having us, St. Augustine. Well, I'd say that was a pretty successful field trip.
Good to be home, though.
Definitely.
Are we going to go back to the jail?
Gabbie.
Yeah, I'm going.